Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's engineer interview with Dave Yates. Now, before we start, my name is Scott and I work at Primary Engineer. I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining the competition this year. It's our 10th birthday this year, so thank you for celebrating it with us. Now, for those of you who don't know, this is the Leaders Award competition, where we ask the question, if you were an engineer, what would you do? The competition is open to everyone from the ages of 3 to 19, all across the UK, and every single pupil who takes part receives a graded certificate from a real-life engineer, just like the ones we interview. Now, we've already started receiving entries from across the UK at Primary Engineer HQ, so make sure that once you've got your designs written down, you can send them in to us. Now, as part of these interviews, we're going to be speaking to engineers who work on loads of different projects, all of them showing the wonderful, interesting, and exciting things that happen when you work in engineering. Although we do host these live, they are recorded and shared on our YouTube channel, so if you missed the whole thing or would like to catch it later, you can find it there. Now, our special guest is going to start with a 10-minute presentation all about his story, all about what it's like to be an engineer and maybe what inspired him to start. And then we're going to open up to the audience for questions. If you do have a question, please type it in the chat box. We unfortunately can't receive audio from the audience, so if you do have a question, simply type it in there. But for now, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful special guest, Dave Yates.
Righto, hello. Yeah, thanks, Scott. My name's Dave Yates. I work with a company called Siemens Energy, and I've been working for them for nearly 5 years now. So as Scott said, I'm just gonna start by talking a bit about who I am, what I do, how I started doing that, and then we'll just do a bit of I'll answer some questions. We'll have a bit of a chat. So yeah. So I work for Siemens Energy. I'm in a department called New Product Development, which means that basically the department I work for right now makes all the new products that the company sells. A little bit of my history. So I was born in County Durham, which I don't know if you can see my pointer, but that's this kind of where this yellow dot here is on the kind of right of that map. I went to university. I did a master's degree at the University of Strathclyde, which is up in Glasgow in Scotland. And I was there for 5 years doing that degree, and now I live in the south of Cumbria, in a little town called Ulverston. It's not a very big place at all. At Siemens Energy. So on the way there, I went to work for a company called Gestamp Talent for a bit, and they're a company that do like car subframes, like the bit that goes underneath your car and kind of holds it up, holds it together. And what I would do there is what's called computer aided engineering, where I would make a model of the part in a computer. Then I would say, right, there's going to be a force here, and it's going to be pressed on here, and it's going to be shaken this much. And I would ask the computer, like, right, where are the danger spots? And if it said here, this is where you got to worry about, then I would know that, right, okay, we need to do something there. I need to do a bit of engineering. And I'll go into a bit more detail about what I do now at Siemens Energy on the next one. So Siemens Energy, we're an energy-based company, as the name sounds. If you can picture like an oil rig out in the sea, or possibly what they call like an offshore wind farm, we do power connectors for those. Yeah, so you might kind of around your house have seen, again, I hope you can see my pointer, like this kind of white thing in the top middle, this kind of extension cord. I'm sure you've got plenty of them around your house. So you plug something into that, it goes and plugs into the wall, power comes from the wall to your phone or whatever. The things that are out in the sea, they need much the same thing, but you can't chuck one of them just in the sea. It'll break, water will get in, it'll stop working. So the products we make do the same thing, but there you can see a few pictures of them over on the right. They look very different because they've got to fit together in a way that's completely waterproof. There's no water getting in. The sea's very salty. It's what's called corrosive. It makes things rust. It makes things kind of, get weaker, degrade. So we need to make sure that our stuff can't be affected by that. And the last issue is, the sea floor is maybe kind of 3 kilometers deep at some points, some bits even more, but the bits that we worry about, go down to about 3 kilometers. And if you can picture, 3 kilometers of water above you, all the weight of that pressing down, that can really kind of damage things. It just crushes them. And you can see there's a tanker there that's been crushed by some pressure. So we need to make sure our stuff can stand up to that as well. So up until quite recently, I worked with a department called production engineering, and we would make like test vessels to make sure the products can stand up to those conditions. They can stand up to the pressure, they can stand up to all the muck and salt and sand and stuff that's under the sea. And one of those vessels is just on the left there. We've got, I think, 165 different pressure vessels for all of our different products. So we would take our connectors, our plug, basically, plug one in one end in the other side, and then fill that pressure vessel full of water. And we just keep filling it, keep pouring more and more in until it's really there's so much water in there, it's crushing whatever's in there. And if the product can survive that, then we know we can sell it. Now I'm in what's called new product development. You can see there's again a computer model of one of our new products on the right there. This is how it connects together. Looking up again, this is how that would go into one of our vessels for testing. That's how it would be tested. But you can see all these sort of connectors, all these bits that just you take your cable, plug it into your next length of cable, and eventually that'll plug into your pump or your wind turbine, or at the shore end that comes into your power grid. That's the sort of thing that we do here. So what is an engineer? I just wanted to put this thing in because I think sometimes people have different ideas of what an engineer actually is. So I can talk about who I am specifically and what I do, but in general, what does the word engineer mean? And I think, some people say, oh, an engineer builds bridges, or an engineer drives trains, or things like that. I say an engineer is someone who solves problems. That's what encompasses all of engineering. So in order to do that, you need to be curious. It's good at, if you look at something and go, well, why is it like that? Someone made that. Someone decided that should be like that. Why? Can I figure out why they've chosen to do that? Or if not, maybe I'll ask someone. Maybe I'll Google it. I think that's a good sign of an engineering mind. An engineer should be willing to fail. A lot of engineering is coming up with new ideas. We've got a problem here. We haven't solved it yet. What can we come up with that might solve it? You come up with a new idea, might not work. It might, you might go to test it and it falls apart. Like, oh well, never mind. But if you're afraid for that to happen, if you're afraid for that, for your idea to be proven wrong, then you'll never come up with any new ideas. It's fine to come up with an idea, test it out. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Either way, either way, you've learned something. So that's really important as well. And finally, I say an engineer should be willing to listen as well. That comes into that curious point as well. If you're want to know how something works and you're not sure, well, if someone wants to tell you, great, give me your information, give me your knowledge. I want that. But even if you've not asked, even if someone's like, oh, well, actually, I see you're working on this, I think this could be better. Yeah, great, sure. Give me your knowledge. That's what I want. And that's how we become better engineers. So that's just, very quick whistle-stop tour of who I am, what I do, and hopefully you maybe understand why why my job exists, why we as a company do what we do, what it's for. But I wanted to give most of the time over to just basically any questions you have. Happy to answer them.
So anybody out there, if you do have any questions, make sure you type them in using the chat box in Teams. But to start with, I have a question for you, Dave.
Okay.
What do you love about your job?
Oh, okay. So one of my favorite things about this job is the fact that I get to solve problems. I like puzzles. Things like riddles and things. Anything where you struggle with it for a little while, but then I've got it. I know the answer. I think that feeling is great. And engineering is all about doing that. You've got a problem. You've got something that's difficult to solve, but you work at it. You maybe come at it from a couple of different angles, and then, oh yes, that works. I like that. So that moment of aha, that's, I think, my favorite bit about doing
That is
engineering.
that does sound pretty good, actually. That sort of, oh, I've got it.
Mm.
When you're in that process and you're sort of trying to work out why doesn't this work, how are we going to fix it? Um, do engineers often work on their own, or do they work in sort of bigger teams working on projects?
A bit of both often. In sort of, at least everywhere I've worked, it's often, you'll be working on something, but there's maybe another few engineers who are on different bits of the same project, or at least are like aware of what you're doing. So you go away and you do a bit of work, you work on your thing for maybe a week, and you're like, right, I think I've got a good, I think this solution might work. I think there's potential in this. So you then go to the people you're working with and you say, hey, what do you think of this? And they go, oh yeah, that's good, but have you thought about this? And like, oh no, I hadn't. And kind of that helps shape you. And you're right, okay, that chat was really good. I'm going to go away for a week and work on it for a bit again, and then we'll meet up and show what we've got, and that sort of thing. So there's a bit of working on your own, but a little bit of working together as well, just to it's always good. Everyone sees different things, so it's
Yeah.
always good to take what you've got and sort of show it to someone else. And does this make sense to you? Does this sound good? And then that's how you get a really good, solid answer.
And that goes into what you said earlier as about listening, so that
Mm,
you're saying, hey, any ideas? And then people come back with ideas. So we've got a few questions coming
oh,
in from the
brilliant.
chat now. So this question comes from Ardross Primary School in the Highlands. Harris would like to know what materials you usually use in your inventions and products.
Yeah, so we use a lot of metals in our work, because the products we make, as I say, have to go like under the sea. So a lot of
Mhm.
the outside structure is made of metal. It's specifically stainless steel, often,
Okay.
because steel's very strong, and stainless, as it sounds, doesn't rust very well. That's why it's called that. It doesn't corrode. And
Ah,
under the sea, that's very important. You get different strengths of stainless steel, and which ones we use depend on exactly what's being made. But that's often used in the structure. But then inside, we use a lot of oil. If the oil can be kind of pumped up to high pressure to match the water, then it means you've not just got crush going on. It's kind of equal, and that helps
ah.
the thing survive a bit longer. Um, and a lot of plastics and things as well, for actual, like when they're making contact, the plastic's got a little bit more give than steel does, which means they can really kind of get in close and seal up so no water can get in as well. And rubber's really good for that sort of thing too. So it's, depending on what the exact function is, what you want the material for, depends on which material you choose. So that's a really big part of engineering.
Yeah, that sounds quite interesting as well, because again, it's that problem. It's right, okay, we need to do this. What material's best for that? That's
Mm.
quite good. So we've got another question in here. This one's from Fordham School, and they ask, how long do your projects usually last?
Ooh, so yeah, that sort of thing can depend a lot on the project. Some of them are just little quick things that maybe can be done in a few weeks, maybe a month. I've had some projects that take a couple of years. You're
Oh,
designing something from scratch. I designed a couple of the pressure vessels that we have here on site for pressure testing the products, and they were, you start the design there from scratch, and you need to kind of design the room that it goes in. There's a lot of safety considerations go into that sort of
ah,
thing. You need to sort of figure out, talk with the people who are going to be actually using it, and well, so how will you use this? Where should it go? How should this be shaped in order to make your life easier? And so from like very start of that project, kind of someone saying to me, hey, we need one of these vessels, to like it arriving and being in use, I think that was a year and a half, maybe, because there's so
wow.
many different bits that went into it.
Yeah, and I
So
suppose,
it
yeah.
all depends on the size of the project, and what it's for, what needs to go into it, really.
Yeah, and I suppose when you're working with things like 3 kilometers of water, you've got to be extra
Mm.
sure that what you're making is going to last.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And when you've got all
So
that pressure like inside a test vessel, you need to know that that's not going to burst and explode while someone's using it. So that's what I mean by there's a lot of safety goes into it. You
yeah,
really need to make sure it's gonna be safe before you get it on site and use
yes,
it.
I can imagine that'd be quite messy, I think.
Mm.
So we've got a question in here from Lily in Miss Cullen's class, and Lily asks, "Do you have any tips on how to deal with a failed design?"
Okay, yeah. So that's a very important skill to have, I think, being able to take a failure and move on from it. Um, Not just in engineering, to be honest, that's just a really good skill to have
Yeah.
in life. Um, I think the best thing is to you know you obviously don't let it dishearten you. Just keep working towards the solution. But it's also good if you can to take time to figure out why the design failed. If I design a new a new product that will help us help us meet some specific requirement, and then maybe it doesn't meet that requirement, so I need to work on that. But maybe it does, but it's now not meeting up to the pressure. It's not able to deal with that. So now I can, okay, so I keep the bits that are working, which bits aren't. Let's see if we can
Mm.
take that and just look at this bit and bring that up to standard. So being able to take something that's failed and sort of say, well, why? What about this was good and can be taken forward? What about it needs a bit of work? And that helps you move on without having to just like scrap it, start again. You can still have some good out of a failed project, and as long as you can see what bits are good, then you've got something still. You've still moved forwards.
Yeah, that's quite clear. Because if it doesn't work, you learn why it doesn't work, and then that means
Mm,
okay, so we don't do this again. Let's try something new. So yeah, there's always something to
absolutely.
be taken from it. So we've got some more questions coming in here. We've got some
Yeah.
questions a little bit more about yourself, Dave. This one comes from
Okay.
Fordham School. How old were you when you decided to be an engineer, and what subjects did you study at high school?
Oh, right. So I think specifically engineering, I think I was maybe 15 or 16 before I really had that decided. I was always quite good at like mathsy subjects and physics and science. So I just, for I don't know if they're still called this, for GCSEs, I did, a lot of sciencey things, but also just, I did history, I did, music, a few things that I just thought, oh, this is, this seems fun. Let's do that. And then for A level, I was like, right, let's focus now. So I did maths, physics, and then further maths as
Oh.
well. I did history for a year as well, just because I wanted to do something that wasn't maths. So, but yeah, at that point, I was pretty set on, I'm going to do something involving this, and engineering is probably likely. Um,
So was there a sort of moment or even a person that inspired you to want to become an engineer? It was that sort of 15, 16 age. It's just you started noticing things and you went, I've got to figure out how these things work.
yeah, it was just. I don't think I can point to one moment or one person. It was just lots of, people would come into the school and talk, or like my dad was an engineer as well. He's civil, so it's a different type of engineering, but
Yeah.
it meant I knew what engineering was as well, which I think helps a lot at that age. You know, there's a lot of stuff that I maybe could have done that I just didn't exist. I didn't know existed.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. You can't be what you can't see, which is why
yeah.
it's good to hear from engineers like yourself. So, we've got some more questions coming in. This one is from the British School of Brussels and Elizabeth Thomas. How long would you expect to spend on a project before you decide things are not working and a new plan is needed?
Ooh,
So, an
so
easy question for you.
yeah, there's a concept that's quite popular in engineering companies called fail fast, which is that if something's not going to work out, don't don't spend too long trying to make it work. Just figure it out and move on. So we have one thing that helps with that. We've got 3D printers on
Oh.
site, where if you want to make like an assembly, a few parts that assemble together, you can just print them out. It's cheap plastic. It's not going to go under sea, but you can still, assemble things together and see, like, is this, if someone's doing this, can they physically get their hands in? Does it work? And you can just figure that out, in a day. You can print things off and try it out. And we use calculations to sort of see, if this thing's subjected to 3 kilometers of water pressure, will it stand up to it? If not, how thick does it need to be? So you can very quickly get, even before you really know what the shape is, you can sort of say, well, it needs to be at least 3 centimeters thick.
Yeah.
So if it's not that, then don't do it. This sort of thing. And you can you can figure out where your lines are of, like, well, that's not going to work, that's not going to work, that's not going to work. So my answer's got to be somewhere in here. And then you sort of work backwards. You don't have a design and then check it. You check it and then make a design in the space that still works, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
No, it does. Like you said as well, about making sure that the environment everyone's in is really safe. You've got to make sure that everything's set up first, and then you go and test, and then you go and try. But we've got some more questions about projects. This one comes from Portmore Primary School. Has there ever been a problem that you couldn't solve?
Um, I don't think, like, couldn't solve. There's certainly problems that have been a lot bigger than I thought they would be at first, and you think, like, okay, I've got this issue, I'm sure I'll be able to deal with that. And you're like, oh no, actually, because I can't do that because of this, and I can't fix that because of this, and I can't fix that because of this, and you're there for months, like, oh my God. I think I've always managed to, like, find a way, even if it does take much longer than expected and maybe needs a lot more people's help than I thought it would. But there's usually something you can do. Obviously, there's some things that, yeah, I've never solved gravity, for example. Some things are just impossible. But in terms of actually, like, we need this product and this is stopping us, you can usually find some way to, even if it's a bit of a compromise, like, you're not going to get everything you asked for, but we can do these things. Is that okay?
And it must be,
Yeah.
like you said, when you take the idea to others, you must work with some really cool people who can also
Oh,
say,
yeah.
oh, in fact, I did this before and it worked really well. We should try it here.
Yeah, that's really helpful as well, drawing on other people's past experience. Definitely.
Brilliant. So we've got some more questions coming in, and still about a little bit about the your projects and managements and how you build things. Is there a set process to design, and how many steps would that normally have? Another question from
Um,
Ford in school.
there certainly is a set process. I don't know if off the top of my head I could say how many steps, but we often go through loops in the process. So you'll start with just what we call a design input, which is just, I need something that can do these things. And there's no design there at all. It's purely just, this is what we want it to achieve. And then you go in, you do what's called concept design, where you're like, okay, well, if something that looks a bit like this and works a bit like this seems like it would solve the issue, and then you review that. You get other engineers together and say, what do you think? Would this work? And they give you advice. And okay, then you go back into you take that advice, put it back into your concept, change it a bit. How about this? And then when you've got a concept that you're fairly happy with, it's still another review, but this time you bring in the customer, the person who was originally saying, hey, now, I want this from you. And I've got this. Does that look good? And they will probably say, oh, could you add this? Could it do this? Could it be a bit lighter? And you say, all right, okay, let's go and work on it. And now we're on, like, what's called detailed design rather than concept design. And again, it goes in loops until a few times around you take it to them and they go, yeah, I'm happy with that. And then we get into kind of testing and building and things. But yeah, it's how many steps it is can entirely depend, because sometimes you go through loops and loops and loops and loops
Yeah.
and loops as people keep, like, having good ideas. And well, okay, you never said that last time, but it's a good idea, so I like it, so I'm going to do it. But sometimes you get something really quick.
Yeah.
But those are the two big stages, like concept design where it's kind of vague, and then detailed design where you know what you're doing and it's just getting the little bits in place.
So we've had another question come in, and I suppose it also relates a bit to your presentation, how you talked about some of the things like the offshore wind farms, where you've got these
Okay.
power cords going out to them. So it's a bit of a general question about engineers, and it's how important are engineers when it comes to helping tackle some of the problems that come with climate change?
I think very important, to be honest, because I think it goes back as well to my personal definition of an engineer. An engineer is someone who
Yeah.
solves problems. That's a pretty big problem. um, to some extent, you can't just, especially things like climate change, you can't just invent your way out of it. There are a lot of problems that are kind of you can try and solve the problem by producing more things that will help to do that, but also like it sort of things, some things have to kind of go on the front end as well as like, well, here's how the problem's being caused, let's see if we can stop that as well. So it's kind of two-ended. But engineers are certainly very important, at least for kind of that far end of like, well, here's what's happening. There's lots of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We want to do carbon capture and storage. It'll be engineers who are doing that, who are figuring out the best way to do that sort of thing. So
Brilliant.
certainly, I think very important.
So, just looking at time, we've got some time for a few more questions. So, if
Okay.
you are sitting on one, please send it in. But we've got a question here that has come from St Andrews Primary School, and it's from Farah. And Farah is asking, what's the most difficult thing you've had to design?
That I think actually for one of the most difficult things actually wasn't one of the things where I work now, one of the subsea um, eh, vessels or anything like that. It was one of the car subframes when I used to work at Gestamp. Because they obviously they don't take big, seawater pressures or anything like that. But what they take is like there's a teeny tiny force, relatively tiny, acting on the frame lots and lots of times. So you don't like it doesn't get wrenched and bent about, but every time the wheels go over like a pebble or anything, there's a little bit of rattle, a little bit of shake. And how many pebbles do you drive over?
Ah,
Millions and millions. So it's always a little bit of force over and over and over and over again. And that can be very difficult to deal with. If there's just one great big wallop coming from one side, you're like, right, well, we'll make it strong in that direction. But if it's just getting shaken, 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 that can be really difficult to work around. And with cars as well, they need to be lightweight. You can't just add material and make it stronger. No one wants a big heavy car that doesn't go anywhere. So it's the easy solution. You put more material in, it gets stronger. It just isn't possible in that situation. It's got to be light, but it's got to be strong as well. So some of those ones were really, you've got to really be clever to design your
yeah.
way around them.
Oh, that's quite tough, that one. So we've got another question in here, and this one comes from our Dross Primary. If you weren't an engineer, what would you
Ooh.
like to be?
It's something totally different. I actually think I might like to be a teacher.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I very, very nearly after my degree went and to study teaching to nearly move over, but as it happens, I didn't, and here I am. But yeah, I think teaching would be very uh, rewarding, very good to do.
Ah, nice. I think we've got time for just one more question, and this is one that was sent in. If you could describe engineering in 3 words, what would
Three
those words
words.
be?
Ooh, oh, I might need to think about that one. 3 words. So I would say fulfilling, by which I mean, sort of what I mentioned earlier, that like aha moment you get
Yeah.
whenever you solve something that's really, enjoyable. That's really good. You feel very proud of yourself when you've done that. So it's very fulfilling, in that sense. Um, it's I'm trying
It's a
what
tough
word
one.
am I thinking of? Yeah, just trying to distill everything down into just a couple of words. Um, it's quite cooperative, I guess, is a word I'm after, where because you've got to kind of, you're working a bit by yourself, but you've also then got to take in ideas from other people or suggestions from other people. Maybe someone says, I need a product that can do this, and you say, yeah, I can design that. But then it's not me that'll have to build that product. So I need to go downstairs and say, look, I've got this. Is that possible? Can you make that? So it's very cooperative. I have to bring in other people's suggestions in that way. And as well as that, so we've got fulfilling, we've got cooperative. Oh my God, I don't know. Yeah,
Those are two good ones.
yeah, there's lots of things I could say about engineering. I'm just struggling to get it down into
Yeah. It's
one
not
word.
it's not an easy one. I think it's why I wanted to ask people. Oh, because all these amazing things are free, but I think you've explained so much. And look at the time. I just want to say
Oh,
thank you so much for doing that as well, Dave, because you've sort of taught us a lot about engineering and hopefully inspired some engineers in the making in the audience. Because everyone
hopefully.
out there, it is now your turn to come up with your own engineering ideas. Remember, once you've got them all designed and written down, to send them in to us so that we can get our certificates sent out to you, and we'll hopefully see you at our public exhibitions at the end of the school year. Now, don't forget, this interview will be uploaded to YouTube if you would like to watch it again or share it with some of your teaching colleagues. But for now, I just want to say thank you, everyone, but a special thanks to Dave. And remember, if you were an engineer, what would you do?